Morning, Rabbi.
Good morning. Good morning. Okay, so let's continue just the basic halachas of a ganav. Ganav shehidu alav edim kisheim sheganav. If a ganav is caught because two witnesses that are kosher testify that he stole, not that he confessed, but rather that he pretended that he didn't steal until Adim came and testified against him. Chayev l'shalim shnaim l'bal hageneva im ganav dinar mishalim shnaim. So he has to pay double. That's called kefil. If he stole one, he's got to pay back two. Ganav chamor oksus o gamal mishalim shnaim b'dameha. If he stole a donkey, a garment, a camel, whatever it is, he's got to pay twice its value. Nimtza mafsid kishir shabiktesh lahachzir lebaalim. So he's going to be out of pocket the exact amount that he tried to make the owner out of pocket. He's got to restore the item that he stole. Plus, there's a penalty that he pays whatever he tried to cause the loss to the owner. Now, Ganav shehoda me'atzmo sheganav, but if he confesses on his own, like he has a guilty conscience, mishalim esakeren upoter min hakefal. So then he pays back whatever he stole, and he's potter from any penalty payment. Shenemar asher yarshiun Elohim yishalem shanaim, because the pasuk says that only if the judges incriminate him in court does he have to pay double. Lo hamarshia is atzmo misham shnaim, but not if he incriminates himself. V'hu hadin l'chol haknasos shamo debahin pater. And this is the din with all knas, any penalties that the Torah imposes. If a person confesses, so then he's going to be pater.
So is there any time frame, let's say 30 days or
I don't believe there is a time frame. It could be years later, and he was never caught. And if he confesses, he's got to just return what he stole, but he doesn't have to pay any penalties.
But he used the stuff. Whatever he's supposed
Well,
to use it.
no. So I'm saying if he used it and it's no longer the same quality, he's got to replace it monetarily, whatever he stole. Okay, Isha Shagan Vavadin Eisha Ish. So what about a woman who steals? Is there any difference? Echad ha'ish ve'echad ha'isha shagan v'chayovim l'shalim tashlumi kefil v'tashlumi arba v'chamisha. So as far as the laws of penalties and having to pay back, men and women are exactly identical. Ha'isa ishas isha emo l'shalim. What if a woman who's married stole? Like a woman gets caught shoplifting, okay? And if this was, now remember, we said before, we don't impose any knas nowadays. The rabbis in the post-Talmudic period did away with any knas payments. But let's say, in theory, we restored the knas that whatever you stole, you have to give back, plus pay whatever the value of it that you stole. Harei hakefel aleh hachov ad shetitkaresh o yomut bala ubeitin nifrain mimena. So the halacha is that if a woman has no assets because she's married and really technically everything that she owns belongs to her husband, so then what the Beis Din would do is we would say, okay, this debt that you have because you have to pay kefil is in the form of a loan or a debt, I should say. It's a debt that is outstanding that you have because you can't pay it because you have no control over any finances. It's all your in halacha. When a woman gets married, her husband controls the finances, so she's considered to be penniless. As soon as you get divorced or your husband dies, then you have to make good on the debt. Okay.
What about a minor?
That's a good question. Does a minor have to pay? He hasn't discussed that yet. In general, we don't impose a knas on a minor. The minor would have to make restitution, but would not have to pay any kind of knas penalties.
Restitution when it becomes of age, stuff like that?
No, restitution as soon as he's caught with the stolen item. Remember, let me just make sure maybe I'm not explaining it properly. Restitution, what I mean is giving back that which you stole. Kefil means paying back in addition to giving back what you stole, giving back the exact value on top of that. If I steal an item worth 100, I have to return the item plus pay an additional 100. That's the knas, that's the kafel that we're dealing with. Okay, so if a child were to steal and he gets caught with the stolen item, he has to return the stolen item, but I don't believe we impose a knas.
What happens if he disposes of it or it's gone or whatever? It's got no money
Right.
out.
So in that kind of situation, the question now becomes, does the parent have a financial obligation? If you recall, we learned in Rav Shraga's Sefer that a minor who steals is technically off the hook if the item is destroyed or lost. However, it's brought in the poskim that when the child comes of age, he should feel a duty. It's almost like we said I don't know. I don't know that we can say it's an absolute obligation, but it seems pretty strong from the poskim that he's got to do whatever he can to pay back whatever he stole or damaged. Yeah.
What about an unmarried woman? Married, like,
So if she's unmarried, then the law is no different between a man and a woman. A thief is a thief. Okay. Now, Chumras Haganav Mehagazlan. And we talked about this before, why there's this idea of kefel for a ganav, but there is no kefel for a gazlan. If a gazlan steals, a robber mugs somebody and steals her purse, he only has to give back what he stole. He does not have to add on top of that the value of what he stole. Okay, so why is that? The difference between someone who steals and someone who robs. Okay, Shahaganav mishalim tashlumi kefil ve'arba v'chamisha v'hagazlan mishalim v'sakeren. A ganav has all of these penalty payments, but a gazlan just pays back what he stole. Hatam lazeh amru chachameinu zal. Our sages express the reason. Mekevin shahaganav lo hishre kavod evet lekavod kono va'asa es ayin shel malaki ilu enu roa, is because the ganav, in a sense, is worse. A person who steals with stealth is making it as if he's more worried about human eyes than divine eyes. He hasn't even placed God's honor at the same level of human honor. He's placed God's honor below human honor. He has made the eye of the above as if it's not there. Vesa ozen ki ileinu shamas, and the divine ear as if it's not listening. Shuhu yarei mibnei adam u'me'ayin shalmala lo nisa. He's worried about the humans who might catch him, but he's not worried about the God that is watching him. Ke'ein shenemar, hoy hama'amakim me Hashem lahastir eitzah. Woe to those who try to hide from God. V'hayama machshach ma'asehim, and they therefore do whatever they try to do in the dark, because they think yomru mi ra'anu umi yada'anu. And they say, who's watching us? No one's watching us. No one knows what we're doing. V'ne'amar vayomru lo yir'eh ka v'lo yavin elokei Yaakov. And they say that God does not see and he doesn't understand. Ki amru azav Hashem es haaretz ve'ein Hashem roa. They say that God has forsaken the earth and is not looking. Okay. Next. Tashlumim kisha'as hagizela. Payment at the time of the robbery. Ganav behema okelim v'chayotze bahen uvish'as hagenei v'hayashave arba'a. Now, what this means is, how do you, let's say the item is no longer intact, like Hal was talking about, and we want to assess how much a person has to pay, but there's a fluctuation in market price on the value of the item that he stole. So if a person steals, let's say, an animal or utensils or any kind of chattel item, and at the time of the theft, it was worth 4 zuz, let's say, but now that the Beis Din is trying to evaluate the amount that he stole, the item is no longer worth 4, it's worth only 2. Mishalim keren kisha'as hagineva. So here's an interesting bifurcation in halacha. What we do is that if the item is no longer intact, he has to give back the 4 zuz to make up the item that he stole at the time that he stole it. But now that we assess the penalty, which is give back the same amount that you stole on top of that, you only evaluate it what it's worth now. So if it went down from 4 to 2, you pay back 4 and then plus an additional 2, not an additional 4.
Or it went the other way, like, let's say you stole gold or gold nickels. And you came to return it, the value of gold had gone up and it doubled.
Yeah,
Pay double.
that's right. That's right. You pay basically what it's worth now. Yeah. Hayashave b'sha'as hageneva naim uv'sha'as hamad b'din arba. So this is exactly what he says, Doug. If at the time when you stole it, it was worth 2, and now at the time when we assess what you have to pay, it's gone up in value. Im shochat o machar o shavar akli. So if the original item that you stole is no longer intact, mishalim tashlume kefalo arba v'chamisha kisha'as ha'amad b'din. So you have to pay what it's the penalty amount is what it's worth now, right? So the imesa habehemo avad akli me'elav mishalim tashlufe kefel kisha'as hageneva. But that's only if you caused the loss of the item. If, however, the animal that you stole died on its own of natural causes, or the item just got lost, and it's not that you actively destroyed it or sold it, so then the penalty is reduced in the case where it went up in value, and there you only have to pay what it was worth at the time of the theft. In other words, the rabbis went easy on a guy when the item went up in value, as long as you didn't destroy the item. It's a little complicated, right? In the case where it goes down in value, the penalty amount is the lesser amount. In a case where it goes up in value, the penalty amount is the higher amount if you destroyed or sold the item. But if it got destroyed on its own, you only pay what it was worth at the time that you stole it. Okay, gonav v'nif chita hagezela. Okay, and what if an item becomes degraded, the item that you stole? Gonav kli v'shavro o pachso o nishbar o nifchas me'elav. If you stole an item, a widget, and the widget gets damaged, either you damaged it or it got damaged on its own, and therefore it's reduced now in value. Guy steals a car and crashes it or whatever. Ein shaman lo hapchas elaroin kama hayashava hakli u'mishalim balim shnayim b'damav v'hakli hashavor yihiyeh leganav. So we don't evaluate the differential, but rather we look at it as what was it worth at the time that it was stolen, pay double that amount to the owner, and then you, the ganav, get to keep the original item. So if you stole my Corvette and you smashed it, keep the smashed Corvette and pay me twice the value of what the Corvette was when you stole it.
So then apply, if they stole the item and got rid of it, either whatever they did with it, right, they sold it for money. Now would they still pay double the value of what it was? Because they can't return it.
Correct. That was the previous halacha. If yeah. Okay.
But does the owner has a choice? Want back that smashed up Corvette, or it's
that's an interesting question. What if the owner has sent a sentimental attachment to it? It could be that if it's to the ganav's financial advantage, then we would allow it. If the as long as it doesn't add to the penalty of the ganav, I don't see why it wouldn't be allowed. Okay. Next, when you steal from hektish or when you steal from a non-Jew, does the penalty payment still apply? Agone v'sagoy o shaganav nichse hektish eno mishalim ela keren bilvad. So we know that the prohibition of stealing applies equally to Jews and non-Jews. However, this law of the penalty amount only applies when you steal from a Jew. It does not apply when you steal from a non-Jew or when you steal from hektish. Okay, it's simply because it's based on the pasuk Shenemar Yishalem Shnaim L'Re'ehu. The Torah says, pay back double to your fellow Jew. That's the word reya, is to your fellow Jew. L're'ehu below lahektish, l're'ehu below lagoy. So l're'ehu teaches me that it's if you steal from hektish, hektish is not your fellow. It represents God. So if you steal something from the temple, for example, you would not pay double. And similarly, the word re'ehu means a Jew and not a non-Jew. V'chein hagonev kodshim mibeis ba'aleihem poter min hakefel mitashlumi abrav l'chamisha shenemar v'gunav mibeis ha'ish v'lo mibeis hektish. And similarly, if you steal something that was already sanctified by its owner to be given to the temple, so there's no penalty payment. Again, because the Torah only says you steal it from if it's stolen from your friend's house or from a man's house, not if it's stolen from if it was an estate of hektish. Okay, now let's talk about who was asking me about a minor. Who was asking me? How? Let's talk about a minor who steals. Katan shaganav pater min hakefel umachzirin davar haganav mimenu. That if a minor steals, he has to return the item that he stole, but he doesn't have to pay the penalty. Vim avdu enu chayv l'shalim afakeren. And if the item was lost or destroyed, then the child is pater from even paying the principal. Vafilu la'achar shehigdil, even after he becomes of age. Mikol makom ro'ei lebeis din lahakos haktanim al hageneva kifi koach hakatan kidei shelo yihiru regilin ba. Nonetheless, the Beis Din should discipline, and here in the good old days, the Beis Din was authorized to inflict corporal punishment on wayward children. So they would pull the kids in, and give them a whipping. Good thrashing. Right, there you go.
So what are the parents involved?
Yeah, parents have no liability when their child steals, which is interesting, right? Because we talked about this when we learned it in Rav Shraga. That's not the secular law, right?
Right. Remember, we looked at that Parental Responsibility Act.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So one example I went through where one of my boys, one of the yeshivas, there was a candy machine. And the candy machine sometimes works and it doesn't work. So he put his money in, so frustrated, kicked it and broke the glass. So of course I got a phone call and they didn't pay. They're there. So that.
So technically, you could have, if you would have known these halachas, you could have said to the yeshiva, "I thought you go according to halacha. How can you make me liable to pay?" Was your son below bar mitzvah at the time? Oh, okay. So the yeshiva had every right to say your son is liable. How would you like him to pay? Do you want us to bill him? You could have technically said to the yeshiva, "My son's a legal adult. It's over bar mitzvah. It's his liability. Why are you coming to me?" And their response could have been, "You're right, Mr. Biren. It's not your responsibility, but your son is no longer welcome at our yeshiva, right? Would you like to make him re-welcomed at the yeshiva? That'll be $300 or whatever the cost of the glass was. I assume it was more than $300.
I forget, but it was not cheap.
It was not cheap, right? Yeah, that big machine glass. Yeah. Anyway, yes.
If the child is less than 6 years old, the parents are still responsible for the child.
It's still.
The child, the parents are only responsible to look after the child at the age of 6. And after that, it's
No, but as far as liability for theft, parents are never liable. It's not the parents' liability, even though they're responsible to watch out for the child. The Beis Din could actually discipline the parents also at their discretion. But from the technical halachic standpoint, just like the Beis Din can discipline the children, kedei shelo yiru but that the children should not do this, they can also discipline the parents. Like, who told you to have 14 kids and then let them run around like wilde chayas? V'chein im hiziku shar nezikin. And similarly, if children run around causing damage, the Beis Din could do the same thing. V'chein makinas ha'avadim sheganvu v'hiziku makaraba b'chdei shelo yihiyu meshulachim lahazik. And the same would hold true with servants who steal. And it sounds like the Beis Din has the jurisdiction to exercise corporal punishment on servants.
Why would the city put in the same bracket as a child?
It's a good question, I guess, because yeah, I don't know. But remember, we learned, I don't know why he's putting avodim in the same category as minors. It could be because the owner there also can claim it's not his responsibility.
Or if the city stole something not from the owner, but from someone
Right,
else.
right. Yeah.
Okay.
So while time get makod, right?
Recognize voices?
The recognized voices? Some.
Mary, hello? Is someone speaking on the Okay, sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
so adults don't get makod, they have to pay the money, but they don't get makod also, while Katanim only get makod, right? We're just talking about.
Adults
Adults
never get malchus, yeah. Because the Torah says that their method of rectification is through payment. Yeah. So let's see here. What were we saying? Okay. So this is the law with minors. What he doesn't include is what Rav Shraga included, that we know from many of our Gedolim that when they were younger, if they caused damage or stole, they always made good once they became adults. And that's something that he doesn't mention over here. Hachiyuvin be'eved shaganav. The obligations regarding a servant who steals. Again, this is not halacha l'maisa because there's no slavery today. Ha'eved shaganav patr min ha'kefil u'ba'alav peturim. If a servant steals, he doesn't have to pay the kefil penalty, and also the owner of the slave is exempt. She'ein adam chayav al niskei avadav, because a person is never liable for the damage that is caused by his servants, afal pi she'ein mamono, even though they're his property. Normally, if my property damages, I'm liable, but not when my servants cause damage. Because my servants are intelligent humans, and therefore I can't control them. Because if the master angers him, the servant can always go and cause huge amounts of damage just to spite the master. So nishtachar ha'eved chayev l'shalem ha'kefil. But once the eved is freed, and he becomes, we're talking about a Gentile slave here. I'm not sure if the law is the same with the Gentile slave or a Hebrew slave. I'm assuming that he's only talking about a Gentile slave. Once you free a Gentile slave, he becomes Jewish, and then he becomes liable to pay whatever he stole. Plus, he has to pay kefil. Okay, let's go on to the next. Yes, I sent another package. I did. I sent one. Did you not get it on the WhatsApp?
Thank you.
Okay, but I did send it on. I'll tell you when I sent it. That's okay. Let's see, when did I send it? Did anyone else? I sent it on Sunday. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Sent it on Sunday. Okay, there we go. Okay, so let's go on to the next. To the next one. Here we go. I'm beginning this here. Let me try the share again. Here we are. Okay, if the ganav does not have the means to make restitution, ein leganav lo karka v'lo metaltalim l'shalim ba'ara gneva. If the slave is completely indigent and has nothing to his name, based in mochrim oso v'nostim damav lenignav, the Basin would sell the person as a slave. That's the concept of Eved Ivri, that he works for 6 years for his master, and then he goes out on the 7th year. Shenemar im ein lo v'nimkar b'ginei vasa. That's what the Torah says explicitly. If he doesn't have the wherewithal to make restitution on what he stole, so then he gets sold as a slave. Ha'ish nimkar b'ginei vasa v'lo ha'isha. But that's only if a man stole. A woman never gets sold into slavery, even if she doesn't have the means to pay back. Shenemar b'ginei vaso v'lo b'ginei vasa v'davar zemipi hakabala. This is part of our oral tradition that a woman does not get sold as a slave if she stole. Now, there are situations where a na'ara can get sold into slavery. A father can sell his daughter as a slave item or a slave person, right? That's an amma ha'ivriya, but that's only, which again has no applications whatsoever in modern times, but that was the Torah law. But when it comes to a woman being sold into slavery for any other circumstance, that can't happen. Just going through the halacha, a person who steals and he's stolen, but the animal dies before he can get it out of the property, off the property. So he's a real shlamazel, this guy. He breaks in successfully.
So the question is, did he actually steal?
Right. He breaks in successfully, takes a hold of the sheep and is about to schlep it out. And all of a sudden the animal keels over and dies. So, ein haganav nasa ganav lihischayiv al hagneva, bein betashlume kefel uvein ba'onsin, ad shiyasa b'gneva echad min hakinyanim shekana b'hem esametaltalin, va'ad shelo kana eino mischayiv. So first of all, we have to establish that a ganav is not liable for making restitution on anything that he stole or any penalty payments, etc., until he legally acquires the object that he stole through one of the methods of kinyan that causes transaction, that creates a transfer of ownership. And therefore, if the guy was schlepping the cow while it was still on the property of the owner, he's going to be exempt because he hasn't, if he were actually purchasing the animal, he would not become the legal owner until he pulled it off the property of the owner. But as soon as he removes it off the property of the owner and then it drops dead, so then he's going to be liable. Now, let's say it's a smaller animal. If he lifts it up, like he picks up a sheep or a lamb or a dog or whatever, and then it dies, okay, then he's going to be liable. And the reason is because that's the difference between schlepping and lifting up. When you schlep an animal, it's got to actually go off the property of the original owner in order for you to become its owner. But when you lift an animal up, as soon as you lift it up, no matter where you're standing, you become the owner. Now, let's say a person didn't make any of those legal methods of kinyan, but the animal nonetheless entered into his property, whether his rooftop or his backyard or anything like that. So then the halacha is that even without doing any of those legal methods of transaction, the animal has become yours by entering into your domain. And therefore, if anything were to happen to it after that point, you would be liable. Okay? So this is where we'll hold it for today.
If you have next door neighbor's cat factor with that point.
Well, no, you're not going to be liable. The cat went on its own. You didn't get the cat to come onto your property. We're talking about a ganav who's, let's say, coaxing an animal, opens the gate of,
Encourage it.
encourage it to go, but doesn't actually schlep it and, or pick it up, yeah. All right, we'll hold it here.